Hi, Stitchers. Welcome to Tatriz Talk, where we share conversations about Palestinian embroidery. I'm Lena, here with my co-host Amani, chatting with talented embroiderers and artists, sharing their stories, inspirations, and the cultural significance behind their work.
Today, we're diving into an urgent topic, one that needs our community to be aware of. We're talking about a Kickstarter campaign that's exploiting Palestinian embroidery under the guise of collaboration. This is about more than just tatriz. It's about cultural appropriation, the struggles Palestinian artisans face in selling their work, and the ways outside forces continue to profit off of our heritage while Palestinians themselves are blocked from doing so. To help us unpack this topic, we are joined by two incredible guests that we are honored to have. First, we have Bisan Al-Haj Hassan, a lawyer and founder of Thobna, that I'm sure all of you are familiar with. It is a platform that shares Palestine through our Thobs, helping to preserve and circulate our cultural treasures. And we're also honored to have Salma Shawwa, a Palestinian content creator from Gaza, whose work sheds light on the Palestinian experience through storytelling and advocacy. Together, we're breaking down why this Kickstarter is so problematic, discussing the real challenges Palestinian artisans face under occupation, and most importantly, share what we as a community can do to push back. Thank you so much, Bisan and Salma, for joining us today. We are glad that we were able to talk to you guys.
Thank you for having me.
So, to help maybe ground us, I'd like to kick off with you, Selma, because I know that you've been actively looking into this particular Kickstarter campaign and raising awareness about it. Can you help showcase what exactly this Kickstarter is all about and what's wrong with it?
Yes, so basically, following the Oscar win for the film called No Other Land, there was a Kickstarter that was shared by Basil, who's one of the directors of the documentary. And there's also another director who is Israeli, which made the documentary controversial to say the least. But, anyways, focusing on the Kickstarter, that Kickstarter was shared right after the win. And we started looking into it, and it turned out that the founder on the Kickstarter is an Israeli businessman. And upon further investigation, Yossi Levine, who's the founder of that Kickstarter, actually has 14 other Kickstarter projects that are very, very random, ranging from selling whiskey bottles to wooden handles for bikes to even selling tiles taken from homes in Haifa, which is quite bizarre. And if you take a look at each individual Kickstarter that has to do with Palestine, including the one about the tiles and the tatriz, there isn't a clear mention of the story of why those tiles are abandoned to begin with in Haifa, or what is the point of taking those tiles? Like, there's no mention of that history. There's also this vagueness around who the perpetrator is, which we know is Israel, but this use of language, it's like a manipulation of what's actually going on because it's always vague who the person doing the person who's oppressing is never mentioned, which is super problematic. And I saw that to be a theme in multiple of Yossi's Kickstarters, including the Tatriz one, which is obviously the most atrocious because it comes after the Oscar win, which means that Yossi was actually able to fundraise a lot because of the fame that comes with an Oscar win.
Yeah, and I remember Bisan, you actually messaging me as well about this particular Kickstarter campaign and why it is incredibly like a huge risk for cultural appropriation, a huge like I think you mentioned in the messages like Palestinians have been fighting to maintain our ownership over Tatriz because it is a Palestinian art form, and this could unravel all those decades of work. I'm curious to hear like what is your reaction to this Kickstarter? Why is it such a scary thing for you as someone who is in Palestine and working with Tatriz?
Yes, so as Sarah mentioned, it has been already a topic since the Oscar win and how people have been interacting. A lot of people did not really understand even regarding the Oscar win. And then we had to explain a lot to several people around the world what it means. Regarding Tatriz, I always like to talk about it from the from the perspective of the importance of Tatriz. Tatriz is not just it's not just like something that Palestinians, create and sell. It's how we tell our story, and it's how a lot of women all through history have been documenting a lot about Palestine. Um, the danger in this situation is that you actually are presenting tatris to the world in the market and in fashion shows and in different places around the world at this moment as a collaborative work or heritage between Israelis and Palestinians. So this narrative does not exist, even if few people come out and try to tell the world that it exists. It does not exist. Palestine is occupied, and the occupation has been trying to steal everything Palestinian, not only the land, but everything connected. And of course, Tatris is one of the ways they're trying to, rob us from everything about Palestine.
Yeah, and one of the things that Lena and I were chatting about in prep for this episode was exactly that of like how they have tried to steal our culture in various ways. And one of the most recent ones specifically related to Tetris that really stood out in my mind when we were talking again, because it was so recent. I believe it was in 2021 during the Miss Universe pageant when they were in 48 and they brought all these women from all over the world to go and experience Bedouin, and I'm doing air quotes, Bedouin culture. They were wearing like falahi thobs. They were, literally like sitting there rolling up wara dawali. So it's insane to see that as a Palestinian in diaspora. And I can only imagine what it is like for Palestinians in Palestine who are literally like, this is their everyday life and this is their culture. I'm curious if either one of you can kind of speak on how the occupation has tried to steal Tetris in the past and has tried to claim Tetris in the past.
So I want to make something like just clear that we're not only talking about Tatris, we're talking about everything regarding the heritage, including even the agriculture, the food, the music, Tatris, like everything that is Palestinian. Um, the occupation has always tried to own everything and then only allow Palestinians to work for them. So this is what this initiative or business that was released in the Oscars is about. Um, when they do that, they basically just want Palestinians as cheap labor. And that's what they've done all over Palestine, whether it was with like handmade uh, projects or like everything else, agriculture, including everything. So what basically Israel has been doing all the past years with Tatris, um, they try to claim it for themselves. They do try to buy lots of old, thobes and then claim that it's theirs. Um, of course, they stole tremendous amount of thobes all through history. They haven't ever been able to actually say it's theirs. It's really hard. Tatris and thobes are more than just, a handmade skill. Um, you can't like steal the thobe and then claim it's yours and then, have it. Even when they tried a lot and they tried to even, have it in businesses and to sell it like all over the world, but they still couldn't manage to ever claim or convince anyone that it's theirs. It's really hard to steal culture because it's not something you learn overnight, and it's not something you gain overnight, and that's why they use power of business, and that's why they try to control these things throughout controlling that they are the people who are financially controlling it, and then they use the indigenous people to actually create everything and then they sell it. But for me, I see this as like a problematic thing. Um, Not only like with Tatriz, with so many different things maybe we talk about later in the podcast.
Yeah, and I could add, I remember a few years ago there was a fashion brand that had a similar concept of bringing together Israelis and Palestinians. That brand was called Adish Clothing. It's since disappeared. I think it failed, which is great. I'm not unhappy about that, but it's the same idea of like, it's almost like they want Palestinians to not end the occupation, but instead work together to benefit Israel. And there's this illusion that this is bringing progress and peace and development when it's not. And all that this does is it benefits the neoliberal order that we're forced to live under as Palestinians. So it's all very deceitful, from the marketing to the story that they tell, the narrative, just everything. And it's even, I think it's even bigger than just cultural appropriation or normalization at this point. There's like so many material implications that come with this way of thinking, because if someone is to if more people were to believe that this is the path to liberation, then we're in a huge crisis, because we don't want this model to be replicated with other people and businesses.
Yes, one like very important thing we need to always remember, that financial power is very important. And one of the things I try to tell people is that you know why a lot of Palestinian women actually are selling their old thobes nowadays is because they're financially unable to survive under occupation with everything that we're going through. So it is very important for people to, be aware of the source that they want to buy from if they really want to support Palestinians, because buying Palestinian products and buying Palestinian tatriz from Palestinians is a way of awareness and support.
Yeah, 100%. And actually, I would love to kind of maybe pivot to why it's so difficult for Palestinians to sell their art themselves. Like, why is this is coming up? This isn't the first time, is kind of the point of this conversation, right? Like, this is something that it's a huge red flag, because Palestinians have been going through this for decades, since 1948, and even probably before. And so I wanted to learn more, and I know both of you actually have this kind of experience because you have lived or live currently in Palestine. What are the barriers that exist for Palestinians that, they have to resort in some cases to, air quotes, collaborating with Israelis?
So Lina, there are endless barriers. The first thing that comes to my mind is no freedom of movement, no freedom of like exportation. I just want to give you an example that, like, a Palestinian person who wants to sell anything or wants, like an everyday, life for a Palestinian, like we are completely banned and blocked on every sort of way that we can receive money from anywhere in the world. So this is a huge, like, factor why a lot of Palestinians cannot sell their products around the world. There's hundreds of people who create handmade embroidery all over Palestine, and yet they're never able to sell anything because first, they cannot send it abroad. Second, they cannot receive money. Third, they are like, finding hardships with materials, to reach to places. If you want to go from one village to another in Palestine and go see one of the women who embroider, you could spend hours on checkpoints. So this is also something, that like makes it even harder. Let's talk about Gaza, for example. Gaza was a huge source for like embroidery and handmade embroidery, and a lot of people professionally, handcrafted a lot of things in Gaza, and all of that was gone. The struggle that Gazans are facing wherever they are, not only in Gaza, even a lot of them who had to start from scratch all around the world. Let's talk about, for example, the Majdalawi fabric. They're still facing a lot of, and this is just an example of, Palestinian handicrafts and what you face on daily basis as a Palestinian. So when someone, an outsider, and we emphasize on this, when an outsider, someone who's not Palestinian, has zero roots to this culture, they easily come and basically treat people as like a business, they appropriate the culture, and they use people with like very cheap labor, and then they make a lot of money by not telling the real story behind it. They're mostly unable to tell the real story because you cannot come as, a pure like American investor in the West Bank and just start selling Palestinian products, and pay people very little money and then make loads of money out of it, and then say you're creating women empowerment through selling embroidery. This doesn't make sense, and that's what's really happening. Most of the projects or businesses that are able to maintain or succeed, they're not run completely by Palestinians at the moment, or not Palestinians in Palestine, because of all of those hardships and struggles.
Yeah, I know you touched on it, Bisan, but I would love to understand, and I'd just love to emphasize for the readers, or sorry, the listeners, what you talked about, the restriction of movement. I have purchased a number of beautiful handmade thobes from you, and I know, as you said, it is a struggle for you on how you're going to get the money from outside and how you're going to actually send the thobes. Could you explain to people what that is like when someone is purchasing a thobe, all the things that you have to go through to get that thobe out of Palestine and to them wherever they are in the world?
Let's say the process of making the thobe, getting to any village or town was doable. Let's say like that day, not the checkpoints we were able to pass, and we can make it. We can get the things sent. You know that we since the genocide on Gaza, we have not been able to receive money into Palestine. So if you're lucky enough and you do have relatives or friends or nice, kind people abroad who would help out by receiving money and then collecting money and then sending them, in any sort of way, in cash, in like in money transactions. A lot of money is like, lost on the way. A lot of that money is basically it goes as services, and then once you have that money to give to the woman, it has gone less than what was paid for the item. In addition to how expensive everything has become, because the everything that we use and that we depend on to create tatriz items has risen in a crazy amount. And a lot of people around the world, maybe they don't really understand that. And that's if you're lucky enough. That's if you're lucky and you have another way or source to bring money in to pay to people. But more than half of the people are not even able to do that. Not everyone is able to travel abroad. Palestinians, a lot of them are banned by occupation to travel or to, commute between places.
And I mean, we again like emphasize this is not the first time, right? And I know Selma, for example, before you changed your social media name actually because you started focusing on not even different content, but just not the previous content that you were having before. Did you want to share any like anecdotes from when you were running Anat International and kind of your experience? Because I remember you were selling handmade things from Gaza as well.
Yeah, we were selling embroidered denim jackets that we would make in Gaza from like A to Z, and it was very difficult. I think the most difficult part was obviously shipping them because of the blockade, and so many different steps were involved in order to get them out to people. Like that process took, sometimes people would place an order and they'd get the jacket like a year later, if not more. So it really was extremely difficult. And then every time that it was, getting a little bit smoother, there would be an aggression. Like something is happening in Gaza, everything shuts down. And that's besides the production process itself, because the materials were so limited. One day you could find the same buttons or the same fabric that you used around the jacket, and then the next day you don't have it. So then there wasn't consistency with what was being shown on the Shopify store versus what a customer might receive because of those small discrepancies based on like what I'm able to find and what my mom was able to source in these conditions. So it was very much an imperfect product, and you can't compete in those conditions. Like you can't actually make it and succeed, which is why I guess a Kickstarter like the one that Yossi and Basil are working on can actually succeed because Yossi has the privilege of being an Israeli citizen and not having to deal with a checkpoint. He can just DHL everything just like any other person in the world because he's not dealing with the occupation. And that's where the problem is. And I think if you take a deeper look into the Kickstarter and the video, for instance, the Palestinian women that are working on the shoes, I mean, it's textbook exploitation. And the things that the women are saying, I mean, not to be mean to the women. It's just, I think, just objectively analyzing the things they're saying. One of the women said, my dream is to buy a car, be the first woman to buy a car in my village. And it's like, why are we diluting the business and like the Palestinian cause and culture to your biggest goal is buying a car? I think there's something to be said about this mindset that the Kickstarter is pushing because that should not be the biggest goal. Like, I want to know if these women are going to have their ancestral homes intact because they're working on this business with an Israeli. Are you going to guarantee that? Or are the Israelis going to bulldoze this in, in a year from now, a month from now? These are the actual root problems that we should be addressing and talking about. And the Kickstarter isn't talking about them because it's about profit, you know?
I want to add that also like the way they still like represent us to the world. I travel all around like almost Palestine and I meet women. They are very strong. They teach me a lot. They can teach the world. So the like the narrative that also they try to say is like it's not a woman's dream to, to buy a car, just to buy a car. And women are not like weak and they're not waiting for like a colonizer or an occupier to come and empower them. So most of those women I work with are very empowering themselves. They empowered me and they do a lot of amazing stuff. So this is also another narrative that I personally like wouldn't accept to be represented anywhere as a Palestinian woman.
Yeah. As you're talking, Bisan and Selma, as you were just like talking about the women that are working and are showcased in this Kickstarter, it takes my mind to this idea of Orientalism. It's very rooted in this, oh, these poor Arab Muslim oppressed women, but not actually acknowledging who's doing the oppressing. So I think it's really important to call that out. And, also as you guys are both talking, in my mind, I'm just thinking about this idea of like, wow, this is also peak capitalism. Because Bisan, to your point earlier, Tatriz wasn't necessarily something that women were creating to sell. It was something that women were creating for themselves to tell their stories. It was just a part of their lives. And as a result of occupation, they are now having to sell Tatriz to survive. So, I think I would love to hear from both of you. If somebody hears this and they kind of have this idea of like, well, I don't understand the issue. Like, isn't it good that Palestinian embroidery is being shared with an wider audience? It is being shared by the world. And isn't it good that Israelis and Palestinians are collaborating? What would you say to kind of that idea?
I I've been thinking a lot about this is gonna be a little bit more like political history, I guess, of stuff that happened in Palestine, but
Mhm.
I think this is very much in line with so Salam Fayyad was a Palestinian that had a caretaker government in 2007, and his whole idea for Palestine was that he wanted to prepare Palestine for statehood by targeting the economic aspect without ending the occupation. And he thought that by doing that, the occupation would end by having this sort of like economic interdependence with the Israelis. And the whole concept was that he actually thought we're going to have statehood by 2011, like Palestinian statehood by mid 2011 was the slogan. And his whole development plan, you can look it up, it's called Palestine Ending the Occupation, Establishing the State. And it just fails. It's so flawed. And I mean, it's 2025 now, and we know that it has failed because you cannot do that without addressing the occupation. And the Kickstarter follows in the footsteps and the same concept of instead of liberation, we're going to liberalize, like just push liberalization, neoliberalism, instead of addressing the politics that's happening. And you can even go back to Oslo because that's when this problem actually begins. And when the PLO became absorbed into not a liberation project, but just normalization. And it was all about collaborating with the Israelis. So you can even trace it back to Oslo, where the political prescription Oslo gave did not make sense given the material conditions that were happening on the ground in Palestine. And the Kickstarter follows this ideology of like, we can achieve peace by using the liberal market, like liberal market discipline. But the thing is, Palestine isn't even in the liberal market discipline in this way. I mean, we have a blockade. So it's not like Israel is allowing Palestinians to even participate in it because we were just talking about shipping and trade restrictions. So how is it possible that Palestinians can even believe that this liberal market ethos is going to free us? I think it's just super, super dangerous. And that's what I would say to people. I think it's important to understand the root of when this even began, like this idea of Palestine can be free, or we can free certain parts of it, like the West Bank and Gaza, by economic interdependence with the Israelis. It's not going to work.
Yes, I think liberation comes when we know how powerful we are, and we don't keep being hesitant about how powerful we've become and we are. And um, I don't think we need the occupation as a partner to talk about tatreez around the world. Um, as Palestinians, I believe that we've never had actual, whether like a governmental or like a proper institute representation. So we've always did that ourselves as individuals, and we've done that very well the past few years. And with tatreez specifically, I think. The occupation is actually using our culture in order to make their to benefit out of it. So to think that like we will need them to actually talk about our culture and make the whole world see it and appreciate it, I don't think that like it's necessary. They're doing the opposite. They're using our culture just like any colonizer uses indigenous cultures just to make money, business, and become more powerful. So if we just believe like how strong it is and we actually understand it, then we will understand that liberation is never, never, ever connected with collaboration or normalization. This can never happen.
Yeah, 100% agree with both of you. So let's maybe pivot now that we understand what the Kickstarter is, which by the way, we haven't actually mentioned the name. It's called the Resolute RGL Sneaker Startup. So I want to be very clear. This is the Kickstarter that we're trying to combat or fight against. So now that we know kind of what's wrong with this particular Kickstarter, let's talk about what we can actually do, right? Like amongst ourselves, we're starting to raise awareness and we're starting to talk about what's wrong. We've identified, like, thank you to Selma and others, what is wrong with this Kickstarter. But for someone who's listening and who perhaps has already invested in the Kickstarter but didn't realize that there's issues with it, what are some of like the next steps that they can take to help us fight against this becoming successful and becoming a thing?
I think if you've invested in the Kickstarter, just know that you could pull back your investment as long as the Kickstarter doesn't like end. There's a deadline. So pull it back right now if you're listening. And I think that's like a perfect first step.
Yes, I agree with that, as well as actually, raising awareness because I really understand that a lot of people actually follow or support certain Kickstarters or businesses without really looking deep into the source or where it comes from. So I think it's very important for people to actually give it some effort and time whenever they have information about such things, is to raise awareness, because we can't always expect everyone to already know, you know? So raising awareness is very important. We also talked about it and all the struggles about, Palestinians being able to, succeed in any of the businesses they make and try to sell all around the world. And I think it's very important to ask people to be very patient. So when you want to purchase something made by a Palestinian, whether this Palestinian was still in Palestine or around the world, people must understand that it's 10 times harder for a Palestinian to sell one of their products. So don't expect it to be as smooth as when you go online and you just shop from, an online shop. Most of the easier, shops that you buy things from are not really owned by Palestinians. So just keep that in mind and be patient and try to really support Palestinians wherever they are with Tatriz.
Wholeheartedly agree. Definitely support Palestinian artists and uplift Palestinian artists and their work. I also want to, because I know that there has been chatter already online, and I'm sure there'll be chatter around this of like, oh, but we want to support Palestinians. Like, this is a collaboration with Palestinians, and we want to support the Palestinians that are involved. What would you say to people who kind of have that reaction and, kind of why this isn't really supporting Palestinians?
Because simply, I think like I've seen that a lot of people use that narrative of, oh, you can't like attack this person because their idea was different. You have no right to represent us as Palestinians by saying, yeah, we are all normalizers. So we like with us Palestinians, it's very specific. When you talk or you represent to the world as a Palestinian, you need to be very aware that it's not only you. You're representing all of Palestine. You're representing, you're representing people under occupation who don't agree with this thing you're trying to say. So it's very important for people to understand that we're not really attacking this person who was after this topic, but we are basically trying to explain to people that it's not okay to represent Palestine this way, and also it's not acceptable that after a year and a half of genocide on Palestinians and on Gaza, that you go on stage when you have a platform to tell the world about Palestine, that you go and present it this way. It's not acceptable. So, in my opinion, if people really want to support Palestine, like there's 100 other people and there's 100 other ways. They don't even have to look a lot into it. Like wherever you look, you'll find something Palestinian. Maybe people need to be more aware that when they want to support something Palestinian, they need to look a little bit into it so they don't fall into the trap as the Kickstarter that we talked about, for example. So maybe we ask people to look into who they're supporting.
Yeah, definitely. Similar. I have similar thoughts to Bisan. I think, especially the last year and a half, with so many people learning about Palestine, it's become much easier for people to get taken advantage of. And I think the best reminder is just because something is branded as Palestinian, it doesn't mean that you're not supposed to dig more and research it. I mean, I went and did the research, and I think everyone should, especially when you're putting your money somewhere, you should research it, even if it says Palestinian. And this is coming from a Palestinian who's seen a lot of things related to our cause, whether it's the culture, the politics, whatever, being taken advantage of by so many actors. So,
Yes. And I think we can be stronger as a community in general if people actually start mentioning. Maybe people can recommend. Like, I'm sure each one of us knows at least 50, people who are trying to make it as a Palestinian, whether it was people still in Palestine, in Gaza, in the West Bank, in the 1948, as well as all the Gazans who had to leave Gaza all around the world. A lot of people are trying to, make it. So we can all share information if we can support those people. We can, try to make a stronger community.
Thank you both. This has been like a really, really important conversation to have. So really appreciate your time and joining us. Is there anything else that you want to say before we kind of sign off? A key takeaway, last minute thought that you didn't get to share previously?
I think I always like to tell people to actually, be very, very happy and proud with our culture. It's beautiful, it's rich, and it's very important that we understand the importance of understanding our culture, knowing more about it, and, teaching the world about it.
I love that. I think she said it all. Thank you both for organizing this.
Thank you both for being here. And just to reiterate again to anyone listening, if you have participated in the Kickstarter, if you have seen the Kickstarter, if you have thought about it, there is definitely ways that you can stand up against this normalization. If you have donated, like Selma said, you can withdraw your financial support. Please do that immediately. Spread the word. If you have seen it, if you've heard about it through this podcast, please spread the word and make sure that people in our community and outside understand what this Kickstarter actually is. And then, of course, as we have said over and over again in this episode, make sure that you are supporting Palestinian artisans directly. Bisan is somebody that works directly with Palestinian artisans in Palestine. There are other people. So please, please, please get involved in the community, talk to Palestinians, learn from Palestinians, and really make sure that you are supporting Palestinians and Palestinian culture so that we can continue to keep our stories alive. Thank you both again for joining us. This was an amazing talk. And thank you both for all the work you do to uplift Palestinian voices.
Thank you so much for listening to another episode of Tatriz Talk. We want to hear about your Tatriz journey. So please, please, please share your stories with us at tatriztalk@gmail.com, and we might just have you on an upcoming episode. Don't forget to subscribe to the podcast on your favorite listening platform, and be sure to leave a 5-star review. You can follow me at Lina Stolb, Amani at Minamani, and of course you can follow the pod at Tatriz Talk. We will talk to you soon.